Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for waiting. And let's get started, and let's do the pledge first. Can everyone please stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please take a seat. Okay. All right, so we have a new business item, and A1 is the appointment of an elementary school principal. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations, Ms. Wasserman. Welcome to Sayase. Thank you. And would you like to say a few words? Thank you.
I just want to thank the board and Dr. Rogers and Dr. Curry and the entire administrative team, all the families that I got to meet, and the staff members for this amazing experience, or amazing opportunity. I'm very excited to join the Sayasa team and serve this community. I do have a really strong connection to Sayasa. My mom is sitting here who served Sayasa for 25 years. So I'm very excited about my future here. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, and welcome to Sayasa. Okay. All right, and we are going to begin our facilities presentation. So if you'd like to make a graceful exit, now will be the time, but you're more than welcome to stay for the discussion. Okay, thank you. All right, so Dr. Rogers, all yours for the facilities.
Thank you. So we're here at this special meeting, so it gave us the opportunity to welcome Ms. Wasserman to the school district. So we're very much looking forward to you continuing the legacy of wonderful service started by your mother, and also following Ms. Colkhorst. And we're certain that you're going to be a very good fit for Berry Hill and a very good leader for this school district. So welcome aboard. Looking forward to all the good things that you're going to bring to us. So, but the occasion of this meeting, while we have this happy opportunity, is to follow up on the board's questions from our last meeting. Some additional ideas for an expansion of the scope of work were raised by board members, and I was asked to do some research on the board's behalf to explore those ideas and come back to the board with some estimates for what those ideas would cost, and whether we had other ideas or suggestions to share with the board as well. So I would just point out to the board, of course, that this is not a lot of time to do a lot of work, this level of work, but we knew that you're anxious to continue your momentum on facilities, and we don't want to do anything to interrupt that momentum. So the first two initial sketches that we had for a gym on the Bayless campus and a gym on the Robbins Lane campus are here for illustration purposes. Those numbers came in significantly higher than the estimates that we had for the gyms at Berry Hill and Walt Whitman. And in the next slide, I'll get into that in a little bit of detail as to why they're so different. But I think these were probably numbers that were beyond what the board was contemplating when you had your conversation last week, because I'm sure you were benchmarking against the gyms that were planned for those other two campuses. So we also started asking ourselves the question whether, if we were going to make investments in these campuses, whether the gym itself would be the right investment, or if there were other ways of looking at the campus configuration that might be better uses of money because they might provide the school district more options, more flexibility, or might start the school district on a process of doing some planned upgrades with an upgrade cycle where some buildings get some attention in a certain cycle and then they're followed by other buildings in the future. So some of the reasons for the cost differences, all around the buildings are perimeters are all the things that make the buildings work. So anytime you add something to the outside of the building, if you were able to find a place that doesn't have buried utilities, it's obviously a lot cheaper. If you're adding on to a place where there's already classrooms, the state requires you to have 30 feet of space from the classroom windows for fire safety. So that means you end up having to create these long connecting corridors, and the connecting corridors use traditional construction, which is our most expensive form of construction. So they tend to add a lot of costs. Electrical service upgrades are also expensive when you add 8,000 square feet of space. If the electrical service to the building does not have enough amperage to support all the additional lights, air conditioning, and power needs that come along with that new space, then we have to do an electrical service upgrade. So that adds to the cost as well. With the initial idea for the Bayless gym location, it would have been necessary to relocate the existing playground because it would have impacted it. And then there are certain code requirements when we're constructing large spaces depending on their size and occupancy. You have to add a sprinkler system. Those are expensive. And then we're required to have a fire access road so the fire equipment can get to the backside of the building. So all of those things created cost for each of those buildings that were not, those costs were not created by the estimates for the other two gyms that we were looking at. Through our conversation about finding a different location for the gym, we explored the possibility at Bayless of locating the gym not in sort of the center of the drawing, which is where it was 2 slides ago, but at the, we'll call that northeast corner of the district, but where the green rectangle is on the drawing here. And what that would do is free up the space that's in the existing gymnasium to be cafeteria, kitchen, and sort of an all-purpose space. That space could be used in several different ways. And then that would free up the cafeteria, which is one of the district's smaller cafeterias, for use as a library media center. It would be slightly larger than the existing library media center, so that space would get a little bit larger, and then that would make it possible to return the current library media center to classrooms. So, and I credit Ms. Bellato for coming up with this idea, but realizing that we would be able to create 2 classrooms out of the existing library means that we would not need to replace the portables, which was part of your original plan. So you would not have to replace those portables, so you could net the cost of the new portables out of the overall cost of this proposal. So just one thing I'm noticing in the slide, I have a number that says cost $8 million. That was just an estimate when we were first started, but we added in some more refined numbers a few minutes ago. So when I get to the last slide in the presentation, that is the number that's more accurate than this number. At Robbins Lane, we talked about a different approach than, again, the one that was initially on the slide before, which would add less square footage to the gym and also add less square footage in the connecting corridor. It still has the challenge of having to remove a transformer, which is right in the middle of where the word gym is on this picture. And we would have to relocate some of the other services as well, but this would be a more cost-effective approach to the Robbins Lane campus. And for what it's worth, this drawing was the drawing that was done in 2018 when we were looking at the potential expansion of the campus if the Syosset Park development went through. So a little bit of design work had gone into this 5-6 years ago when we were having that conversation. So we're in the process of pricing out the specs for this as well. Then lastly, at the last meeting, you had asked about some of the things that individual buildings were interested in, and I think for the most part, we're managing all of the needs at the other buildings. There are, I know the board is always interested in, I'm certainly always interested in anything that can add to safety. One of the challenges at South Grove is the bus drop-off and the car drop-off are both in the same place. And so we talked about whether there was a possibility of relocating the bus drop-off loop to a different spot so that you don't have buses and cars trying to use the same really small parking lot at the same time. And so we hit upon this idea of creating a loop on the west side of the main building that would create that opportunity at South Grove. So just to kind of summarize where this would put us just for the elementary buildings, because really that was your conversation at the last meeting, all of the buildings would have a lot of work that's because of the annual visual inspections and the things that were identified. At 4 of the buildings, we plan to replace portables, and those have come to the end of their life and need to be replaced. And then in Proposition 2, you have a number of proposals that would, projects that would impact the various campuses. So you have upgrades to gym air conditioning. If you were to include these gym additions in the second proposition, obviously you wouldn't have to have gym air conditioning. That's already included in the cost estimates for the gym. And there are other things that were already planned, new playgrounds, expanded parking lot, library renovations, et cetera. So just to, Proposition 1 has not changed since the last 2 slide decks, so there's nothing new to see there. And then in Proposition 2, the first 5 lines are also unchanged, and really the activity is at the lower right-hand corner. So the Robbins Lane Gym addition, if we were just to reduce the size from 7,700 square feet to 5,700 square feet, it would be 7.2 million. If that size, if we were to do what was proposed in this drawing, that number would go up a little bit to 8.5 million. But the advantage would be that you'd gain an all-purpose room and larger kitchen space. So the Bayless, where the number I had was 8 million, this is 7.6. Again, you would net against that the portables that would not need to be replaced, so the 3.2 million, and that would leave you with a net cost of 4.4 million. And then we don't have an estimate on the South Grove bus loop, but obviously it's not nearly as dramatic a project as either of the other 2 projects under consideration. We did go through and look at other kinds of things that could be in the long-range plan for campuses. We looked at things like emergency backup generators. For an emergency backup generator, the price tag would be in the neighborhood of $500,000, but that won't be for a generator that is sized large enough to allow the building to continue operations. It would just be for a generator that was large enough to keep all of the security, surveillance, fire detection infrastructure up. So if we have a building that loses power for any significant amount of time, our decision is always going to be to leave the building and go to a safer spot. We have about 90 minutes of battery backup that gives us the time needed to make that decision. We wouldn't really buy ourselves much more time with the emergency generator. So although we looked at it, I'm not sure that it's the best investment of the district's resources, the public's resources, to explore those generators, but we did think about that because there are a handful of schools that seem to lose power more frequently than others. And again, just returning to the board's directions to us as administration from the start of this project, our priorities have been to repair and maintain our facilities so that they continue to serve us well for the long term, replace those facilities that are the portables that were always intended to be temporary and are reaching the end of their lifespan, whittle away at the list to make sure that it's need to have and not nice to have, and make sure that we deal with our growing enrollment and the challenges that that has posed for us. So we've done that in our previous conversations with you, but Proposition 2 was also about expanding and getting ahead of some of the work that the district wants to do in the future. And so the question for, I guess for us, the direction that we need rather, is to know how much of that potential future work you want to get after in the present, and how much of that will have to wait for another round at some point in the future.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rogers. I know that the board gave you some homework since our last meeting in June, and within the last 10 days or so, with 2 holidays and then some moving up ceremonies, I know the administration, HTUM, and ELE have put in a lot of time into this facilities project. So I just want to, I'm speaking for myself, that I just want to extend my appreciation to the team and also ELE and H2M for the hours that have been put in since last Monday. And I know the board has a lot of questions, so I'll get to everyone, but if I don't see you, please just raise your hand high. All right, Ms. Falcoes.
Yeah, I want to echo what Carol just said. Thank you guys so much, because it wasn't an easy job what we gave you guys with and tasked you with for only a few days. So thank you for putting in so many hours to do this for us. I think we asked this at the last meeting, but I'm not sure we had the exact answer. We were waiting. So for Robbins Lane and Bayless, currently the music, art, OT, PT, all of those things currently have a space like a home. Like art has its own music room, music has its own room. They have that. How long, when those schools were at their peak, which I know they're not currently at their peak, did they always still have a home? Was there always still a space? Or was there art on a cart because they ran out of space? And how long do we have until we get back to that? Until we have art on a cart or OT in the hall or whatever?
So there were certainly times in the past, I'm thinking of Bayless in particular, when it was at its enrollment peak, where I think we were alternating between, and forgive me because sometimes with 7 buildings, I can't remember who's got exactly what, but yes, there were times when there had to be art on a cart or music on a cart in order to accommodate the number of sections of grade level classrooms that had to be accommodated. How long until we return to that? So as you know, we commissioned a demographic study by a national demographer. They came and gave us a report a little over a year ago. Their report had enrollments for the Robbins Lane and Bayless as being level for the foreseeable future, and their report went out to the year, I think, 2030 or 2031. So we, of course, we thank them for their projections, but we watch the enrollment every day to see, how things are actually changing on the ground. And the one thing that has been a trend break for us this year is an unusually small kindergarten class. And what catches my attention is that it's a small kindergarten class district-wide. So if there was like no inventory and no housing inventory, say, in a neighborhood, then you would see that in one school. Or if this was just sort of random, every year there's a big class and every year there's a small class in one school or another. But it is, it's noticeable that it is district-wide that we have small kindergarten classes. So I don't know if this is a one-year anomaly or if this is the result of not having a lot of housing inventory available in Syosset. So instead of 100% of the people that ordinarily would buy a home in a regular year, only 80% of people were able to, and that impacted our kindergarten numbers. So I don't have any good way of measuring that, but that small kindergarten class will move its way through first and second grade. So at least for the foreseeable future, if classes return to normal, we know that all these buildings will have one small grade move through them. But what I've noticed over the years is that the building enrollments tend to go in waves. They have a little bit of a bubble, and then they kind of recede, and then they have a little bubble again. And the period of that bubble tends to be, again, in my experience, 7, 9 years, something like that.
The enrollment in kindergarten that you're measuring, is it enrollment today versus our actuals in August, September, or is it versus our exactly a year ago at this time before we have any summer additions, subtractions, et cetera?
So the typical kindergarten class is in the neighborhood of 400 students. And by the end of the year, that kindergarten class might be 415, 420. So district-wide, the delta you're looking at is maybe 20 kids. Right now, that kindergarten class, I think, is, Teresa, 360, somewhere around there. So you're looking at substantial, like 10% below what we're accustomed to seeing. So we are assuming that there is going to be growth in that class because we typically will get some registrations over the summer. But to be at this low a level this early is surprising.
Ms. Abramson?
I have a lot. Do you want me to go through all of it, or do you want to do one by one? Okay. Okay, I'll go through my, okay, I don't know how to do this. First, I just wanted to confirm the gyms that you were talking about were, I think for Whitman and Berry Hill, you said they were elementary-sized gyms, and were Bayless, and they're not? Well, Whitman was high school, Berry Hill was elementary, and the Robbins Lane and Bayless were high school-sized gyms. For Bayless, I think they were, that one of the issues with the current gym is that it had a half stage. This doesn't look like it has any stage plan for it. So I just want to confirm because that was one of the feedback things I got. If you just do the portables at Bayless and Robbins Lane and the other schools, the classrooms listed in Proposition 1 were, I thought, all had an extra class. It was the current portable plus an extra class. And is that no longer happening if Robbins Lane and Bayless do the new gym? So that was some of them. And then will it work if we put Proposition 2 with all these gyms and different things, and that doesn't pass, but does Prop 1 still have the modulars in it, and then we adjust later? Because those still will need to be fixed no matter what. They can't, they just, I think that was it for now.
Okay, so thank you for that. What we talked about at a previous meeting was different size for the two gyms, Berry Hill and Walt Whitman. The Whitman gym would be high school sized, and it would be rollover space for overflow at the high school. Berry Hill, the location where the gym would go is on a slope, so it's a much tougher topography, more expensive to build on, so a smaller gym there. Also not as accommodating from a parking perspective and an access perspective. So the better location for the larger gym would be the Whitman campus, just logistically. The original estimates that we did on the second slide of this presentation were also for high school sized gyms. So 7,700 square feet on both of these campuses. That's where those estimates were derived from. We did look at for one of these two, and now I'm trying to remember which of the two it was, if we knocked it down to something in the neighborhood of 6,000 square feet, more like the Berry Hill size, how much money was saved, and I was surprised that we didn't save more money. So let's say it was, instead of 8.5, it was $7.5 million. So, and Megan, Kevin, or Ezzy, if you want to jump in here and save me from these numbers, because we've had a lot of versions of this in the last several days. But the point still is true, that it only saved about $1 million to change the size. And the reason for that was a lot of the cost is not in square footage. The cost is in all these other things that have to be done alongside it. Once you touch the building, you have to touch all these other things. So that was what led us to think about, is there a way to use the building differently? And again, Ms. Bellato's great idea of freeing up classroom space so you didn't have to replace the portables at Bayless. So that doesn't work at Robbins Lane because Robbins Lane doesn't have portables to be replaced. So at The Whitman School, the plan was to go +1 on the number of classrooms in portables. At Bayless, the plan was not to go +1 on the portables because the enrollment numbers don't support it. And in the end, when we go to the state education department with our proposals, we'll have to justify the square footage based on enrollment numbers, and they're going to look at the study that was done by the demographer. Obviously, we'll do an addendum to that study based on what's been happening in the school district, but they're going to look for us to justify the square footage because they're paying 40% of that cost, and they want to know that the 40% that they're kicking in is for planned enrollment. So I think that's the answers to questions 1 and 2, and then question 3. The way when school districts structure propositions like this, typically if the first proposition doesn't pass the second proposition, no matter what happens to the second proposition, it doesn't pass. So you have to pass Prop 1 in order to pass Prop 2. So if Proposition 2 didn't pass, and right now in Proposition 2, there are, let's say, 2 things that look like upgrades to what's in Proposition 1. So one of those upgrades is a turf infield for the HBT track. So if the upgrade didn't pass, we would still build the track, but it would just have a natural grass infield. So if we proposed an upgrade to Bayless, because that's the one that's most straightforward, that uses the gym to free up space so we don't have to replace the portables, then that's what we would do. If that proposition failed, then you wouldn't get the gym and you'd just replace the portables with modulars.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, because graduation was today and the gym was really hot. So is there, I know we wanted to keep Prop 1 under $1 million, but the gyms, the AC portion of that, can we put into Prop 1 and then the same kind of addendum where it goes back and forth? Or we really want to keep, how much, I don't remember the cost of just AC for all of them. Was it 8? It's 8. 8.2. I don't know if that anyone wants to consider that, but it really, I don't know how much the fire that we had to put out today because of the heat or whatever, but it's just something to think about.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for mentioning it because it allows me to give a shout out to our facilities team for literally moving heaven and earth to get air conditioning into a couple of our gyms so that our families had a more comfortable experience, and also big shout out to the principals who pivoted and moved 4 of our buildings into air-conditioned space so that they could have more comfortable graduation ceremonies for everyone. So the whole village pulled together, and it was remarkable, but it also, to your point, underscores how difficult it is to have large ceremonies at this time of year, especially with the kinds of weather we've had more recently. So that said, the total number that we had previously for gym air conditioning was $10 million. So the reason why the number here is 8.2 is because it assumes that Walt Whitman and Berry Hill are, because they're in the same proposition, the air conditioning would be included there. So those numbers were taken out of the 8.2. So if all you did was gym air conditioning, then it would be $10 million.
I really liked Walt Whitman Gym being served as high school overflow. As long as I remember, our high school sports team tryouts were at least 1 to 2 weeks long. And it limits so many of our students from participating sports that they want to do. I mean, we have exceptional athletes and we get great results, but I think it's important for more students to be able to participate, and having Walt Whitman Gym will allow more students to participate. If we have high school size gym on Robbins Lane and Bayless, would that help? Just because the distance from high school to those schools are kind of far, busing, I assume that will be a little bit more difficult than busing to Walt Whitman, but would that be something that we would like to invest so that more of our students can participate in gym, we can have more teams, So even if you're not like top of the sports level, that you can enjoy the sports and have the experience in school sports.
So basically, when we're talking about a high school-sized gym, what we're looking for is a 90-foot-long basketball court with enough space around it for kids' momentum to carry them beyond the basket as they're charging down the court, that sort of thing. It's not necessary. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but 90 is almost to a college-sized court. Doesn't have to be, but we're typically around there. If the building is more than 60 feet wide, then you can accommodate volleyball courts sideways. So you need 60 feet on the court and then preferably 10 feet behind each of the baselines. So that would be 80 feet wide. So these buildings are a little smaller than that. They would only be able to accommodate a single volleyball court, not two volleyball courts side by side. So everyone knows I love volleyball. I'm not arguing for volleyball. I'm observing that you get one. You either get one basketball court, no matter how big, or one volleyball court, no matter how big. Well, there's only one size for volleyball courts with these kinds of gyms. So do you have to have a 7,700 square foot gym in order to do intramural basketball at the high school level? No. You could have very successful intramural in a smaller gym. If we were looking at these as practice spaces for varsity level basketball, for example, the issue with having more and more gym spaces is transportation. So actually the least efficient part of all of this is busing. And the most difficult part is busing is finding drivers. So no matter how many satellite sites we have, the thing that will make them harder to use is not less about the size, is the point I'm making, and more about the busing.
So a couple things, because the 7.6 on there is really not accurate, because it's really 4.4 net. Because if you do that, then you save whatever that is, 3.2 on the other end. So I feel like the 7.6 kind of needs to be slashed and made 4.4, just so because that's really a more accurate number for us. I thought he said 4.4 was the last number, right? I thought originally it was 4.8 in the earlier slides, and then in the later slide it was 4.4.
You're right. As I said, we were doing this literally at the last second, and so the 8 number here was an estimate. The number that Elite has put together as an estimate for Bayless is 7.6 instead of 8. So 7.6 minus 3.2 would be 4.4, yes. So what would go in this box ultimately would be 4.4 million.
See, I pay attention. And I know this was like an ever-changing process, so I totally get that one slide was different than the other. But I was paying close attention, so I kind of caught the 4.4. So not only for high school sports, to Shani's point, which I couldn't agree with more, but also for middle school sports, which is a closer transportation. So the high school might be far away from Bayless, but Thompson isn't as far from Bayless. I know middle school sports, and if we're talking about volleyball, I know girls volleyball in both middle schools this year had 40 or 50 kids try out, and I think 15-ish kids made. So, and you're talking about 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds who are trying out sports for the first time and haven't necessarily hit their peak, and so it gives us a lot of room for a lot of things, not just high school, but the middle schoolers to feed into the high school, for them to see what they like, what they don't like, and to be part of the school when they're making new friends and looking for different things to be part of and find out who they are. My biggest concern is that if we don't do that, the gyms now, I mean, I obviously want to keep it as small as possible, the money, but we're just chasing our tails, that we're constantly we're going to get to the point where for years, there's going to be art on a card in another school, and there's going to be speech in the hall, and there's going to be OT, in a different hall, and we're not going to be able to catch the next wave. So now we're going to do it. We're we're just constantly chasing our tail, and that with the percentage that we get back, if we're getting 40% back from the state and it's cheaper to do now, it just, I think there's a lot of points of why it makes sense to do it now, because it's more economical, it makes more financial sense, we get the money back, and then when we have the larger numbers in a few years, the kids will have the facilities and the services that they need. So it's just my 2 cents.
Okay. Wait, do you want to go? No. Okay. Mr. Ostrich, and then Lynn.
Two questions, Dr. Rogers. So one of the things that you said that caught my attention that I hadn't really fully absorbed prior, you said something about state ed and reimbursement being tied to support through enrollment. Does that mean that if we can't demonstrate a change in enrollment sufficient to and adequate for the square footage that we would be adding, that our 40% would be potentially at risk of not getting reimbursed? That's question one. Yes, the second question is related to just thinking over time, to Susan's other point, is do we have a reasonable sort of idea or estimate of what is left for the next AVI BCS cycle? In other words, we've got 50, 60, 70 million dollars of things that need to be done from our AVI BCS because we've deferred a significant amount of maintenance. If you were to say, oh, next time it's going to be, you know, a similar amount, or if it's going to be significantly less, then it probably would impact the size of the asks we would have over time. In other words, if we could have consistent numbers over time, it might help with our planning and bond funding if we did the same amount every time, and we could focus on keeping those numbers consistent instead of being large and then being small, et cetera, because our runoffs would probably, in terms of our bond maturities, would probably be consistent. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is, if in the future our BCS AVI numbers are much smaller, that probably leaves room for increased expenditures to keep the total number roughly the same. But I don't have a sense of what it's going to look like out in time for those other required maintenance elements.
So I'll answer your first question and give the folks from H2M time to collect their thoughts to answer your second question, because they're the ones that did the AVI, and then when the board asked us to reduce the scope to the essentials, they know what things were left out of that because they weren't immediate needs, and we'll have some sense of where to go from there. So the way the building aid formula works, and I may need some support from Dr. Rufo on this as well, they perform a calculation and they come up with a calculation of what is aidable square footage. So there are some things that are not aidable, hallways or something like that. That square footage is not aidable. Classroom space, 100% aidable. Typically, once you get done with the building square footage is 85, 89% aidable, and that's kind of typical. And we work very closely with the architects to design the spaces in such a way to maximize state building aid. So there is a calculation in there that has to do with enrollment. I think in making an argument to SED, we will have the chart that I showed you at the last meeting, which is we're the fastest growing district in Nassau County, period. And there's every reason to expect that that is going to continue for us. So that will be part of our argument to the state ed department, no matter how those calculations fall out, that we can justify. But if we have, and I'm not saying any of the things the board is talking about are outlandish, but if we were to propose something outlandish, building, 5 more campuses, the state would say to us, there's no way you can justify this, so we're not going to aid it. So I think we're within the realm of feasibility in terms of aid. And I don't know, Dr. Rufo, if you want to just amplify.
I don't know that what you said needs any clarification. It was correct. Their They do have calculations, I can't recite it now, on how they decide the building aid units. But if they, as Dr. Rogers said, if they think that you are far in excess, they will potentially deny building aid or ask for you have to substantiate it, additional documentation that you could provide to warrant the additional space.
And then to your next question, how much is left for the next round of AVI work? And there's probably a guess in there about what things are going to break over the course of the next 5 years as well. So Ms. Bellato.
So based on the 2022 annual visual inspection and the 2023 BCS, we have about $23 million that we pushed off based on the categories that we deemed important to include in this bond. The next time Syosset will do a building condition survey is in 2028. The state pushed all of the districts onto a 5-year cycle, so everyone is staggered now. So the next time we will be doing a 5-year inspection will be in 2028.
Was there anything from the inspection where, if I remember reading, I read a BCS once and things are sort of coded by like category of satisfactory and over time. So when we get to that next one, was there something where we look up and like, oh yeah, this is definitely something we're gonna have to replace that we're not taking into consideration?
There's always repair work that you're going to want to do, so roofs will come up, repointing and things like that. Mechanical systems are antiquated, still working, but in those type of items will, in the future, need to be replaced.
Sorry, I had asked just previously, and because I asked so many things, it got lost, but I asked about a stage at Bayless and at Robbins Lane also. I think both of those images didn't have a stage. I did the other two also.
So we talked about the stage at Bayless, both in terms of if it was possible to widen the existing stage that's in the gym, and that ends up being an incredibly expensive proposition because the thing that is keeping the gym from being wider is a mechanical room that's right next to it and a column that is supporting the entire roof. So moving the column, we looked at it and decided it would just be an incredible amount of money to just widen the stage and then relocating all the mechanicals that were in the room. So the alternatives that we thought of were to have the stage come out as an apron like we do at the high school where there's a curved area in front. So now the kids are not sort of buried towards the back of the stage, but the stage would come out a little bit. It would be something that could be taken away for gym class but put in place when there's a production so that the kids would be visible from more parts of the gym. Or if we're going to use a temporary stage in order to make kids more visible, you could install temporary staging in the new gym if it was constructed. So you would store the temporary staging when it's not in use, and then when you have school production, you could put it in use. The nice thing about the temporary staging, we looked at a couple of drawings of those as well. Because they're modular, you can also do them so that they're arranged as risers. They're not all at the same height. So you could have, for orchestra or something, a sloped look so that the kids in the back would still be visible. But then if you're using it for a musical production, a drama of some kind, then they're all at the same height so that you're having a stage. Then you can remove them when they're not in use. We even talked about creating some built-in curtains so that you could still have the change of scenes, change of scenery, that kind of thing. So it is possible to add those in a way that leaves the space very flexible.
I think I wasn't clear. I meant more in all the renderings of the new gyms that you're building, because in most of the cases, what you're doing is you're repurposing the other gym in all of these buildings, and you're building a new gym as the new facility, and the current gyms in elementary schools tend to have stages of some kind for production. The new gyms will not have any stages, only we're doing these portable stage idea. Is that just to clarify?
That's correct.
So a couple of things. So I know that a lot of these numbers are somewhat premature, and thank Ms. Falco for discovering $400,000 in one of the numbers. So if you throw in the 8.5 you were talking about, so if we use the 4.8 and the 8.5 and say we're thinking about something less than $1 million for the bus loop, we're coming in somewhere in the neighborhood of 137 or 138 million dollars. And I know when we originally had discussions, we were keeping Proposition 1 at that $100 million number. And, you know, I think it's worth just confirming the way this will work long-term as a sort of an understanding of the cost, right? You have, and a lot of this is back of napkin numbers. If it's $140 million borrowing, and we're talking about a rate of around 5%, we're probably looking at a total cost over a 20-year payment plan of about $230 million. So it's my understanding that, of course, that will be paid, but I think it's semi-annually during the course of the 20 years. That principal and interest payment is where we get our aid. So we hopefully will get 39% of the principal and interest payment we make, which totals, again, $230. We'll get back 60, we'll pay 60% of that, 61% of that, and it'll be somewhere in the ballpark of 160. So I've always looked at the building aid as being something that offsets the interest. And of course, the interest rate is something we have no control over, and if we have a 7% interest rate when we go out to market for our debt, you know, now you're looking at numbers well above the 130, 140. So I want to make sure that that's the understanding here, because that does play into my thinking that Proposition 1 should stay around 100 million, and then makes me wonder, and I don't want to throw gasoline on this, but I wonder if Proposition 2 really does need to be split into two propositions. And I know we've always talked about a third proposition probably causing more trouble than it's worth, but I wonder if we know we already have a list of items that are our must-haves, and now we have, you know, really need and needs. Do we consider splitting this into three? Because I don't think there's anything on this list that is a bad idea. So the question now is how do we package this and move on? So I guess the first question is, can you confirm that my dummy math is right? And then the second is there any utility in thinking about a third proposition and trying to wrap this up?
So again, I'll do high-level overview, and I'll let Dr. Rufo fill in details. So what the state does when it reimburses school districts for construction, it does it on what's called an assumed amortization rate. So whether you pay cash for the building or whether you take out a mortgage for the building, they're going to pay you as though it's a mortgage, so the state doesn't have to cough up all the money up front, essentially. So even if you pay it off early, 10 years in on your 20-year bond, they're going to drag out their payments over the second half of the 10 years because they weren't planning on paying you early for the building that you did. So that's the way the state does it. They determine the interest rate for that. Dr. Rufo will know more about how they go about doing that. So one way or another, we're going to get building aid from the state. I think the advantage that you're looking at now is that your building aid ratio is almost at its peak. I also think in the future, it is more likely that your building aid ratio will go down than it is that your building aid ratio will go up. The reason for that is through a quirk in how the state formula works, the relative property wealth of New York City is what drives the reimbursements for everyone else, because it's all driven by an average, and New York City is so large that it moves the average around. So what's been happening lately is that districts outside of the city have been looking poorer, so our aid has been getting better. Now the city is looking poorer, so our aid will start to erode a little bit. So I do think we're at a high watermark in terms of what we'll get from the state. It's unfortunate that that high watermark is occurring simultaneously with a high watermark on interest rates. And it's everyone's guess as to where interest rates are going. I'm just relieved to see that they've stopped going up, and of course, optimistic that they may go down. So the other point that I would make is that we won't borrow all this money at once, unlike with a home mortgage where you buy the home all at once, you don't buy it in pieces, and therefore you have one mortgage. We'll end up buying all of this in pieces. So the state won't let us borrow any more than we can show we have a need to spend. So if we're ready to start work on the modular classrooms, but we're still not ready yet with the gyms, for example, the state will only let us borrow for what we can show we have a need to spend. So what will happen is the costs will add up over time, and eventually we'll get to the entire amount being borrowed, but it won't be 24 months from now the entire amount gets borrowed. It'll be slowly ramped up, and then this goes to Mr. Ostrich's question from earlier, it'll slowly ramp down at the other end as these things are all 20 years apart and sort of layered at different starting points, so they'll all have different ending points at the other end. Dr. Rufo, any other detail that we should add to this?
No, I think you covered that, unless there's another question, I'm sorry.
To your point, Dr. Rogers, so you have, look, there's interest rate flexibility, up or down, unfortunately, and then there's building aid flexibility, only down. So regardless of when, we issue these bonds, you have the possibility that if rates are up, or even when they are now, and I don't know, Dr. Rufo, maybe you can answer, what are districts going out for right now? Is it 6, 6.5?
In our discussions with our fiscal advisors, we're using, as we pull together estimates, 4.25.
So I think that hits the nail on the head on my point that there is, building aid can only go down. Interest rate can go up and down. If interest rates go up, we're basically giving up our building aid. The sweet spot for me is about 5% on rates. So if we go out with a $138 million bond, the total cost is going to be about $140 or $150 million over time, net the building aid because of the cost of borrowing. Which does put a little time pressure and leads me to think that maybe the more we do now, the better, which takes me to my other point, which is how do we package all of this work now, and do we consider having the must-haves, need-to-have, and probably need-to-have buckets as 3 propositions?
Okay, so I do like this concept that we are using economies of scale, where if we do build gym space, then we're not spending money on gym space, and then also on the additional classrooms where we would replace the modules. So I know that there's so many numbers, and we've thrown this around, but I really think we probably need to look at this holistic solution instead of sticking the gym in every single place where we anticipate the needs of the entire district versus just that one building. Because I've coached for a long time. We're supposed to have a volleyball game tonight. There's no gym space. We rent space at St. Edward's. We don't have enough gym space. Just for the girls, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, we are this fullest as we could be. We cannot take any more girls for volleyball. There's no boys volleyball team for the younger grades right now. So all of these girls, I don't know where they're going to go play then. So now we have hundreds of kids. There's no spots for them. I also don't like doing things piecemeal. So at the HBT track, we have the artificial turf like we did here at the high school. If we're going to do that project, then we should definitely put lights too, because then before we're digging back up the turf, or the electrical, as you said, is that there? I think we're just we're wasting money on that. Take into consideration how hot it's been today. I was at South Grove. To have a good-sized gym where all the families were able to come, there's air conditioning, it was night and day. So these are not, great to have. I think with the way that global warming is going, we need to have air conditioning. It's not safe for our children. I don't agree that we should have 3 propositions, but I do think we should reorder the 2 since they kind of hinge on each other. My other thing also is these projects take years, so we would not start borrowing and have to pay debt service until we actually were ready to go on that project, right, Dr. Ruffo? So by the time these projects get started, plus we don't know what other pilots are going to be out there, what other revenue streams, so it's hard to throw these numbers out there because they're very difficult to calculate at this point. But having, like I had said, when I first got on the board, our construction aid was 18%. Last year was 41%. That's double what it is. So I think that's an advantage for us to do that. We haven't made an investment in infrastructure in 20 years. I mean, we had people who came today and said, oh, the gym looks like when I went to school here. I mean, we've saved money over all these years. It's time that we make capital investments. It's for the future of the school.
I'm also hesitant to go beyond the 2 propositions. I think these are set up in a way that are thoughtfully designed to show that we are trying to be equitable to the schools in all the right ways to as many schools as possible. We are literally trying to hit everybody and do the right thing for the district. And I think your best way to show that is in this format and to get the most support from all the different schools in the district.
Ms. Ostrich.
Dr. Rogers, do you have or you or Dr. Ruffo have a rough estimate of what every $10 million of bond borrowings do to normally do the calculations per like $10,000 per tax levy, right? Do we have a rough estimate of what every $10 million is?
I don't know if it's exactly that, but Dr. Ruffo has done that analysis.
So I did 100 million. So using that calculation of, for every 10,000 in taxes and taking into consideration debt service, the offset from state aid, and a small roll-off, it comes out roughly to be about 190,000 per 10,000 in taxes. I'm sorry, $190 per. I'm sorry. What did I say? 190,000. 190 for each 10,000 in taxes. For 100 million. Roughly, yes.
So I think I understood that. So for every $10 million, it's $19 per 10,000 assessed, plus or minus. Okay.
Not per 10,000 assessed, per 10,000 that you pay in taxes now. So if you had sorry, just Ms. Rotolo asked me to repeat that just for clarity. So the number is for every $10,000 in taxes that you currently pay, $100 million borrowing is $190 a year. So if you pay $20,000 in school taxes, that 190 would be 380.
Dr. Park?
I also agree to keep it at 2 proposition instead of 3. I want to go back to the size of the gyms in Bayless and Robbins Lane. Since we are doing all the electrical work and the connection, all that work, major work is going to be done anyway, is making the gyms 7,000 square feet instead of 5,000. Is that going to add a lot more money, number one? And number two, we are limiting to 5,000 square feet because of the limitation of the land, or is it just to be cost conscientious?
So again, I'm going to defer to Elite and H2M here. When we sized it down, we didn't save that much money. So I'm assuming that means that if we size it up, it won't cost that much money. But my hesitation is that we're in a different location on the campus now than when we were talking about before. Before it was behind where the cafeteria is. Now we're talking about at the end of that one parking lot that almost goes to the northern state. I don't think there's anything in the ground there, but I just hesitate. There's a backstop there that might have to be moved. Ms. Bellato,
So when looking at Robbins Lane, the larger gym was 8.305, 713. When we reduced that size, it went to 7.275, 968.
So if we keep Robbins Lane gym to be 7,700 square feet in the new option, what would the fee be?
I don't know what it would be with the new option right now based on the additional scope that we added to reconfigure the multipurpose room and those configurations. It would be higher than what we're showing right now to do a larger gym. Yes. Do you know how much more?
I don't know the exact numbers because we just had this discussion late today, but going with the larger gym, it's a better option because you get more for your money, and you're able to accomplish more in the gyms. We've had this in other school districts that they're going between the volleyball. Other people like volleyball too, and going with Wise and so forth. It behooves you to go with the bigger option now because you're paying. If you do it in 5 years, you're going to pay much more money to accomplish this work, not only with labor rates, material, and delivery charges. So it behooves you, if you have the opportunity, to go with the larger gym. That's what we're finding as we go through the numbers.
Mr. Greco.
So I think, look, I was trying to be strategic in thinking through the different levels, and I apologize, because I don't remember who said it, and it may have been Ms. Abramson. I think maybe the fix that would actually make me feel better is maybe moving the ACs into Proposition 1, because it sort of lines up with what I want to present to the public, which is, we're using so many ridiculous words, but like the must-have and the really need, or however we're going to word it. And the reason I was coming up with the concept of maybe floating a third is because we sort of have three, but if I look at this list and I say to myself, especially after today when we all were in gyms, or we weren't in gyms because they were too hot and we had to go somewhere else, the air conditioning probably does belong as a need. Again, I'm throwing that word out again and confusing it with what Prop 2 is, which is need also. So that would probably be, in a two-proposition framework, what I would change from your list, obviously numbers being a little bit all over the place.
Mr. Ostrick.
So I'm sort of warming up to the idea of reordering some stuff as well. When I think back to when we started, we gave you a strategic priority set, which was AVI BCS, health and safety, manage enrollment. Now we've moved into the nice to have stuff. Lots of stuff, nice to have. So if we're going to stick with two propositions, let's have the strategic stuff that we outlined at the beginning, the things that we need to do in Proposition 1, and start swapping stuff around. So tracks with infields, and extra gym space for everybody, because everybody, and move the stuff that's enrollment related into Proposition 1. So health and safety, air conditionings, and the Berry Hill and Whitman gym additions into Proposition 1. And if we're doing bus loops for health and safety, then that goes into Proposition 1, if that's still something that we're considering doing. And everything that's the nice to have, even though we have time in the future for it, should go in Proposition 2.
Ms. Koshia?
Thank you. I also think we should just keep the 2 propositions, not move to a third, but I'm agreeing with just a little bit of the moving around. I do think the gym ACs should go into Proposition 1. I also think that the South Grove bus loop should go into Proposition 1 as well, because the reason for the addition of it is the safety, and if anybody's ever been to their campus, where they do the drop-offs and pickups, it's even just to maneuver a vehicle around there, one car, is very difficult. So in my opinion, air conditioning should get moved over, and the South Grove bus loop should get moved over to Proposition 1. But I think we should leave Proposition 2 then the way it is, because in the end, if it passes, then realistically, the numbers on Proposition 1 are gonna start shifting around, because if we add the 8.2 million of AC into Proposition 1 and Proposition 1 passes, then correct me if I'm wrong, but the number on Proposition 1 changes because we no longer need, for argument's sake, the 3.14 million for the Bayless modulars. Because the Bayless modulars, we'd have to take that out because the addition would already be done. Am I correct? I mean, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. Right, not the air conditioning. If Proposition 2 passes, I'm sorry, with Proposition 1, then the numbers on Proposition 1 start to change around. Because then we no longer need, for argument's sake, the 3.14 because the gym addition gets added. Am I right with that or no?
Yes, so the best example on this chart, again, because some of the numbers are very hastily added, but the best example on here is the gym air conditioning. The number we showed you 3 or 4 meetings ago was $10 million for all the buildings. It's a little more at the middle schools because those gyms are bigger, like $800,000 each at the elementary schools. But if you're building new gyms at Whitman and Berry Hill, you don't need to air condition those gyms. So that's why it's not a $10 million number, it's 8.2. So the net increase would be 8.2 million. And similarly, the track artificial turf upgrade, the 3.77 million that's there, that is the cost of not the track and the turf, but just the upgraded turf that's in there. So in Proposition 1, you have HBT track with grass infield, 1.85. That is netted against the overall cost for the track with artificial turf, leaving you with a difference. The upcharge, if you will, is 3.77. So that is in there. I didn't put the number for the Bayless Gym Edition net of the portables replacement yet because that was a very fresh number as of just a few minutes ago.
So I think it's important for people to understand. I mean, it sounds a little confusing, but it really isn't, that if they get passed, these numbers that we see, they start to get bounced around because some things are intertwined within each other from 1 and 2. That's really the only point that I wanted to make. But also, when you get a minute, could you just explain, because we are definitely on a time is of the essence with this, and if you could just take a minute to explain where we have to be time-wise as far as giving the okay to just kind of push us along with the impending election in November and the use of machines and whatnot.
So we have heard that it is likely to be difficult to rent voting machines from the Board of Elections the later it gets in October. So it is possible to rent election machines. There are vendors that have these things available, so it's not that you'll have no options, but our best option, because it's the machine that our poll workers are trained on, is to get the machine from the Board of Elections, and it's slightly cheaper, but again, it's not enough of a difference that it should sway your decision making. So if you wanted to target the first week in October and give yourself the best chance of still being able to use the Board of Elections machines, then the last possible day you could make decisions about scope of work would be at the reorganization meeting on July 8th. But we've talked about the work that goes into what has to be posted immediately after that, and there is some lead time that H2M needs. So the sooner we can narrow down whatever additional scope there is going to be, the faster they can do their work. The problem is, right now they've got 85% of that work done because Proposition 1 hasn't changed much in a long time. But what we do with Proposition will affect what they're doing. And there are two timelines that you have to keep in mind. So you have to adopt the proposition that goes on the ballot 45 days before the ballot. So that backs you into essentially the first week of August 8th, let's say, and you'd have to have a special meeting like on August 8th in order to make the first week of October. And that meeting doesn't have to be a discussion or anything. It could be a 30-second meeting, all in favor, all opposed, and we're done here. Because the scope of work is actually going to be already known for the 30 days prior to that. So the SECRA process, State Environmental Quality Review Act, requires us to announce that we're going to make these changes, and we have to give other governmental entities the opportunity to say if they want to be the lead agency. I think it's unlikely that another municipality is going to declare itself to be the lead agency of the projects that are occurring on our campus, but they are still entitled to 30 days to think about it. So what we have to do is we have to describe the project in enough detail that all of these entities, the town, the water district, the whatever, can look at it and say, oh no, that's the school district, let them do it. So we need to know what the scope of work is. We need to decide not that it's a gym, but that it's a 5,000-foot gym or an 8,000-foot gym. Like, we have to be at that level of detail. It'll take H2M several days to put that together. We're all mindful of the time pressures of trying to hit an early October date, because that's what you've been looking at. But if we are not in a position where we can give them even more direction from this meeting and then absolutely put pencils down on July 8th, we won't make it.
So, Dr. Rogers, I didn't hear you answer her first point, which my understanding was, so say we moved gym air conditioning into Prop 1. It's going to go back up to the 10 million in Prop 1, and then Prop 2 will be net for the Whitman and Berry Hill addition. So in other words, people will be voting that if they vote for Prop 2, the numbers they'll see in Prop 2 will all be lower because they'll be net numbers because there's stuff in Prop 1 that has to be approved first. Is that correct?
It is correct. So the 8.2, if you moved it into Prop 1, would look like 10. And then the Walt Whitman Gym Edition, instead of being 6.5, it would be 5.8. And Berry Hill, instead of being 5.5, it would be 4.8, 4.7.
And just so you have, consensus and you know how we feel, I'm also for just adding the bigger space to the gyms, because in the long run, it just makes more sense. We're looking to save dollars today that will be a lot more in the future. So in my opinion, I think if we're doing this, which I think we should, it should just be the larger gyms. It'll serve such a better purpose for all the students and community.
Ms. Abramson?
I just want to kind of reiterate, because I said this last meeting, and we're talking about gyms, and we say gyms, but it's not about the gyms in the end. I mean, it is about the gyms because they are a means to provide They're a means to the end to provide more space in the schools and more facilities in the schools that need more space. And by the same token, they also allow our district to take advantage of having a new gym in a different way. So we call them the gym upgrades, and while that sounds like we're being frivolous, it is not frivolous additions. They are for space. They are for making sure that we have the capacity in the schools that have been at capacity or very close to it for the past 10 years or so, and that we continue to make sure that we have gym space for the entire district as we grow. So I, again, will say Walt Whitman and Berry Hill, they absolutely need more space. I will not take that away from them. I support it 100%. But saying that Robbins Lane and Bayless are just because is not accurate. It's just what we're doing gym in the same way that we're doing it for Berry Hill and Whitman. We're using that same concept, applying it to another school, and actually making it better for the entire district as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So what I'm hearing is that the board is interested in increasing the gym size. And then we're keeping just 2 propositions and rearranging the Prop 2. Right now I'm hearing moving the gym AC to Prop 1, right? And then, and that's what I'm hearing, and then just that, right? And then also the South Grove loop. Okay, so do I have, okay, all right. So that's what I'm hearing. And Dr. Rogers, you know, because time is of the essence, if we wanted to get it done, put the bond vote out early October or sometime in end of September. At this point, yeah, sure.
Did people want to move the generator or safety, or was the generator, or no, we think it could stay in Prop 2? I could go either way, I'm just asking.
So earlier I mentioned that we had explored the generators, and for the $500,000, I don't know that it really gets you much in terms of capability at the building. So the buildings have battery backups that let them have 90 minutes essentially to wait and see if the power comes back on or prepare to evacuate. And even with a $500,000 generator, the size is not enough to do, to continue to run the building. You'd have to have a generator that is probably 3 times that costly in order to continue functioning in the building. So as much as I would like to provide some power continuity, I don't think that you would say anything changes appreciably about our health and safety decisions even after you spent $500,000. So it's hard for me to recommend that to you because I can't say this is the thing that will improve as a result of it.
Okay, all right. So with that, as a board, are we all okay with these, you know, rearrangements? And then the number may be a little different for Prop 1 and Prop 2, but it's all within, you know, we see the ballpark, and then the bus loop, that's the number that we'll be getting. But are we all okay with what Dr. R presented to us? Okay, and then Dr. R, anything else you want? Yeah. Okay, Jack? No. Okay. Falco? Okay.
I have a question.
Okay. All right, ask your question now.
I'm making, I guess, an assumption. We're talking about moving an unknown number from 2 to 1 with the bus loop. We're talking about a $500,000 project, right? We're not talking about, it's been a long time since I built a bus loop.
Same here. Ezzy, can you please give us a sense of how much you think the pavement for that bus loop would be? Just ballpark. We're talking $100 million? We're talking 50 for a little loop of paving.
Sorry. I would say it's probably about the 1 million to 1.5 million, and that's just an assumption based on other projects that we've estimated previously, because we have not done the full estimate on this one yet.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Good? Okay, I'm good too.
we're doing the turf at HBT, can we include the lights on that? Because what did we pay last time, 600,000?
I think it was 880 for the lights here.
But would it be, if we did it all at one time, it would be cheaper, I would imagine?
So the advice that we were given from H2M with this project, and was good advice, and we would do it again with the HBT field, is to run conduit under the track and field so that if ever in the future you wanted to do lights, you didn't have to touch any of the infrastructure. So when we put the lights here, 4 years after we built the field, all the pole boxes, all the conduit, everything was already there. All we had to do was drop the stands. But it was about 880, as I recall, to do these lights. And I think it might be possible, to, for a middle school field to do something slightly more economical than the lights that are here. But again, I sort of defer to, it's been 2 years since we bought these, so I don't know what the market's like now.
For the lights, you would, exactly what you indicated. However, you would place the lights in a position that it's not destructive to the work you accomplish, meaning Musco lighting is the intended. You would need cranes to place the lighting. So you would put the conduit, the wire, stub it up, the pole bases, which is very destructive, and later on we could place the poles and the light fixture.
So the one thing we need to consider at HBT is the electrical service and the location of it, which would be a different cost than what we had at the high school in Southwoods. We pulled electric for the high school from Southwoods, which is a closer distance, so that's also something that needs to be considered in the cost, so it may be higher, plus with the rates going up in cost. So that's something we would have to look at further.
So it's the same concept, like, so if we're gonna build gym space and then we can use it, if we're gonna build the field, then we should have lights, because again, now that gives us more capability, so that, if we can at least get us a cost on it, and put that in the proposition too.
So if the lights here were 880, are you thinking that the electrical service is 200,000, 300,000?
We don't know the specific requirements as yet, but tomorrow we'll have some numbers. Okay? But it's going to be over $250,000. We know that. Because you have to run, you don't know how far you're running it from, and you don't know what the need is. But I could get that for you.
Can Dr. Rogers, can we do the conduits and then save the lights for something that's done in a future budget?
Yes.
Well, that's why I want to know the price, what the price is.
Hey,
Right.
Dr. Rogers, you could do the empty conduit, you can do the wire, you can even do the bases, and then add the poles and the lights later. So it defers the cost of the pole and the lights later.
So it's a question of how much of that work you want to do now. The one thing for sure you should do is put the conduit in so you don't have to disturb any of the work that you do. And then, how close you want to get yourself to the lights or all the way there, that, I defer to the board in terms of what you want.
Okay, so let me just, ask the board about the current, and then we'll come back about for the lights, okay? And Dr. Park, Mr. Rotolo, as is?
Yes.
Okay. So how does everyone feel about putting the lights in the turf field? We're going to reverse order then.
The cost, we need the price.
Right. Okay, so then, so if we are getting the cost, that means we can't finalize it today? Yet? Okay, yeah.
The numbers that we have on here, on Proposition 1 with the grass and field at 1.85, is that with conduits run in there? Or is that only on if we do the turf?
We would include the conduits in both of the projects. So it's in the track number as part of Proposition 1.
Okay, so if this passes, Proposition 1 only, we're still gonna have the conduits, which means at any time later in the future, we could take excess money from if we have, and we can then just run the power and get the lights done, right? We're not going backwards either way.
No, you're not going backwards, that's correct.
Okay, just wanna make sure.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I'm going to say we should wait for lights, just because maybe we wait to see the usefulness at the middle school versus the high school. That's my only thought.
All right. I do have consensus to wait on the lights and then just keep all the propositions 1 and proposition 2 and then rearrange the 2 items from move to 2 to 1. All right? And Dr. Rogers, anything else you need from the board?
I'll ask it because they're probably going to say it anyway. What are these next steps? Obviously, we're giving you marching orders, and we have unknown numbers right now, so.
Right. Well, I think we're very close to, you know in the ballpark of where we're at. We don't have precision, but you have a sense of what all of this will cost. So my question for H2M is, do you need anything else? I'll write this up and give it to you so that you have it and you have something to refer to. Do you need anything else from us in order to start working on the letter of intent?
No, we have an idea of what the sizes of the gyms will be and all those spaces, so we can start working on that.
Okay. So in that case, they have everything they need for the letter of intent. They can get started on the letter of intent. You will have to adopt something formally at the reorganization meeting so that we have something to show that there was a board resolution that informs that letter of intent. But as long as they can work on the letter now and have it ready to go, then you're still on track for your early October timeline.
And in the meantime, I know there's going to be a lot more work, and especially the number crunching, and then please update the board, as these numbers come in even before the reorg meeting. Okay, thank you. All right. Oh, good. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.